you everybody for joining us today. We're grateful to have you all to discuss something that I am very excited about as only a freshman member of Congress to have gotten to participate in the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. Has been really an incredible honor under the great leadership of our chair, Castor, and I'm so grateful to Kathy for joining us today to speak more about the Select Committee report. The official title is Solving the Climate Crisis, the Congressional Action Plan for a Clean Energy Economy in a Healthy, Resilient, and Just America. And it really, I think, is a defining issue of our time. And I'll spend just a minute or two talking about the report. But before even that, I want to thank our 4 guests from our congressional district, California's 49th district, for joining us. I'm going to be introducing each of them for just a minute before they speak today, but they are truly experts in their local communities and really in our region when it comes to the climate crisis and thinking through the local policies that we need, whether they be the government policies, the business policies, the nonprofit policies. These are some of the real leaders, and I'm really grateful to them for joining us today. Since April of last year, seems like a very, very long time ago, so much has changed in our world since April of last year, but that is when the Select Committee, under, again, the fantastic leadership of Chair Castor, began to hold hearings, began to solicit information from so many of our members. For those familiar with how Congress works, you've got several different committees of jurisdiction, given that climate change is such a broad topic that covers so many different areas, everything from the technological aspects of it, to the infrastructure aspects of it, to the natural resources aspects of it, and everything in between, tax policy. So it really is a very broad set of congressional committees, and Chair Castor did a magnificent job in trying to really harness the best ideas from across the entire United States House of Representatives. The result is probably the most comprehensive report on climate change that we've ever had in the history of the United States government. And it's 500 plus pages. So if you have some extra time to read and you're interested, it's worth a read. It's truly an amazing report. And of course, you can see it at climatecrisis.house.gov, where you could see the report itself. You could see the section by section, the breakdowns, some of the top lines, or the 4-page overview. And I think there's even a 1-page overview if you really don't have time for anything more than a few minutes. But it is literally hundreds of policy recommendations for Congress, for the administration, to reduce carbon pollution quickly and aggressively, and to do it cost effectively as well. Such an important part of all this, to make communities more resilient to the impacts of climate change and to build a durable and equitable clean energy economy. I was honored that many of these recommendations came from bills that I helped to introduce in the Congress. And 7 of those bills made it in the report. I'm very proud of that. The top line goal of the action plan is really commensurate with the science, which I'm so proud of, and that is to reach net zero emissions economy-wide by no later than 2050. So our country would then continue to reduce emissions, of course, after that, to achieve net negative emissions after 2050. According to an independent analysis, our plan would reduce net greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. by at least 37% below a 2010 baseline by 2030 and 88% below the same baseline in 2050. So I am really confident that if we can do what we set out in the report, that we can achieve what we know is needed from the scientific consensus, which is to dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions across the economy and to accelerate the transition to a more sustainable future. Many of you know, long before I pursued public office, I was very active in the clean energy industry, clean energy nonprofit world here in our region. And I knew then, just as I know now, in fact, I believe even more strongly today, that the solutions to the climate crisis, including those that we've laid out in this report, are not only good for our planet, but they're also good for our economy. And particularly at a time right now with COVID-19, where we have 20 straight weeks of, I think the most recent was 960,000 people applying for unemployment insurance, now 28 million plus on unemployment insurance. We are going to need a bold jobs program for the future, and the clean energy jobs, as we detail in this report, can be a big part of that solution. We've seen this protecting the economy, or protecting the environment and growing the economy in California. We know that it works in California from our lived experience. Up until the pandemic, we saw the growth of the clean energy sector, and Jason from Clean Tech San Diego can speak to it specifically in San Diego. But it has been an incredible job engine for the state of California, and I know it can be for the nation as a whole as well. Last year, California supported more than 500,000 clean energy jobs in areas such as energy efficiency, renewables, and clean vehicles. That was nearly 10% annual job growth before the pandemic. And we know that these strategies, the same things that we've done in California, can be effective as we look at what to do next as we think about our future economically and environmentally in the United States. A few bills that I just want to highlight briefly that we worked on specifically, including one that is bipartisan called the Public Land Renewable Energy Development Act, which I introduced with Paul Gosar of Arizona. If you know Mr. Gosar and I, we haven't agreed on everything, but we definitely agree on the need for more renewable energy, and specifically the opportunity not just to use our public lands. I mean, look at what happened even this morning with the announcement around the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the desire to drill everywhere, whether it's on the Florida coast for Chair Castor's state or on the California coast for my state. There's so much better that we can do, like renewable energy, where it makes environmental sense. And that's where our Public Land Renewable Energy Development Act comes into play, calling for 25 gigawatts of new renewable energy on our public lands by 2025. We also have our ZEV Act, the Zero Emission Vehicles Act, that we introduced in the House along with Jeff Merkley in the Senate to put our automobile industry on a path to 100% of new car sales being zero emission vehicles by 2035. That would have an enormous public health benefit as well. According to the American Lung Association, transitioning to zero emission vehicles would deliver $33 billion in total health and climate savings by 2050. The 90% reduction in the pollution that causes smog and soot would also translate to 195,000 fewer lost workdays, 96,000 fewer asthma attacks, and 2,200 fewer premature deaths. Also, the expansion of EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure, has been really important. Our bill around doing that in some of our federal areas, like our parks and our forests, that made it in the report as well. I'm very proud of that. And what I've said all along is that we have a choice. Either we will lead or other countries will lead. I'm convinced that in 20, 30 years' time, we will all be using an entirely new suite of technologies to move goods, move people, the way we build buildings, the way we generate electricity, the way we grow food. All of it will be transformed one way or another. The question is whether the innovation will come from the United States and whether the jobs and the industry will be grown in the United States. And I certainly want that to be the case, and I hope you all do as well. Some also, I've heard this a lot, and so has the chair, we hear about the cost of all these actions that we propose. But what is often lost is the cost of doing nothing. The cost of doing nothing is massive. According to my friend Marshall Burke, who's an economist at Stanford, the cost of doing nothing and allowing events to take their course over the coming decades will be approximately $25 to $35 trillion if we do nothing. So when you hear about, for example, the Vice President Biden, talk about a $2 trillion climate plan, and people say, oh my gosh, we can't afford $2 trillion. If we do nothing, we're talking 25 to 35 trillion. So we have to put the numbers in proper context. And for me, it's all about my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old. Christy and I have them here. We're at our house right now, and hopefully they won't Zoom bomb us by the end of this, but sometimes they do. And if they do, you will see that they are always on my mind and in my heart as I think about what we need to do for our future, for our planet. I want them to inherit cleaner air, cleaner water, and a more sustainable future, and hopefully pass that on to future generations as well. And there's really nothing more that concerns me with everything else going on than the future of our planet. and making sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our future and really chart a new hopeful course for America. And this report, the last thing I'll say is a little bit of self-promotion about this report. It has been widely praised by a lot of different people. And you never know when you write a report like this. Our staff did an incredible job, but you don't always know, particularly on a topic like this, where people have a lot of opinions. But Vox called our select committee report, and I quote, "the most detailed and well thought out plan for addressing climate change that has ever been a part of U.S. politics." That's pretty amazing. And our chair had a huge amount to do with that, as did the great staff that worked on this policy, on this plan, and really made sure that it was reflective of all of the different ideas, all the different policies and strategies that we need to be successful. So with that, I'm so incredibly grateful to have my friend, our chair, Kathy Castor of Florida, here with us. She has done a remarkable job chairing our select committee, and I've just been amazed by her leadership during this difficult time. Obviously, it hasn't been easy to get the word out about our report, but Chair Castor has done a magnificent job of doing that as well. So with that, my friend, Chair Kathy Castor of Florida, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Rep. Levin. Thanks for the opportunity to return virtually to San Diego and southern Orange County. It was one of my very first stops after the Select Committee was created by Speaker Pelosi and the Democratic Caucus. You brought me there to convene us at Scripps, to listen to scientists and listen to the local governments. And Jason, I believe you were there representing the entrepreneurial spirit of Californians. And let me just say from the outset that this report would not have been as detailed, as scientifically based without Congressman Mike Levin on the committee. He brought a new energy and know-how to the Congress when he was elected. He has, I don't know when he sleeps, really. He was instrumental in crafting major sections of our report. And I really encourage you all to go and take a look at climatecrisis.house.gov. It is a detailed plan of action. It was crafted over the past year. Our bipartisan committee listened to scientists, entrepreneurs, farmers, environmental justice leaders. We held numerous hearings, conducted extensive outreach, and this is our product. It was, we rolled it out at the end of June, in the middle of the pandemic and in the middle of reckoning for racial justice in this country. And what I learned the whole way along, all of these issues are interconnected. What our report does, let's get into a few of the details. We lay out a pathway to achieving net zero as soon as possible, but no later than 2050. That's what the scientists say has to happen if we're going to avoid the worst impacts and the worst and higher cost driven by climate change. And let me just say, our task is urgent. We are running out of time. The Congress has dawdled for too long. I'm grateful that states like California and local communities and businesses and entrepreneurs and folks all across this country have been taking climate action. But there is no substitute for a broad-based strategy out of the federal government. And that means the Congress has got to act. So this is the roadmap. And fortunately, we were not starting from scratch. You will see throughout the report, we've highlighted existing pieces of legislation that can get us there. And many are bipartisan, and that's the way Congressman Levin approaches problems, trying to build consensus. You all know that. It was modeled by the independent think tank Energy Innovation. And in addition to what Congressman Levin said, that if you take our roadmap, we get 90% of the way there, of where we need to be by 2050. But it also says, just in the it's establishing a clean energy standard alone, we can create over 500,000 jobs every year through 2050. We can save over 62,000 lives due to public health improvements. And we'll see climate benefits of about $8 trillion. That's going to come at a vital time when we're trying to recover from the COVID-19 induced recession. What I hope also will not be lost, and I hope we can talk about this too, this is the most impactful report and recommendations when it comes to resilience, strengthening our communities. Because unfortunately, because the United States and the rest of the world, we have not confronted climate change as we need to, we're going to have to spend a lot of the time adapting and strengthening our communities. We have extensive recommendations on improving water systems, wastewater systems, conserving public lands, empowering our farmers across the country so that they can withstand higher temperatures, extreme flooding, all of those impacts that are building up time after time. So here are a few of the high points in the report, and I want to get your reaction on all these, especially as Californians, as you all have been in the lead when it comes to climate action compared to the rest of the country. We took a sector by sector approach and said, okay, this sector of the economy, we're going to establish certain performance standards for you to meet. We're technology neutral for the most part, but we're going to set some benchmarks and put some teeth behind it. So first and foremost, the power sector. We've got to clean up the power sector as soon as possible. We say no later than 2040. And listening to scientists and all of the experts when it comes to renewable energy and energy sources, they say that is entirely doable, but we better get going right away. We establish a clean energy standard and an energy efficiency standard. Then for the transportation sector, that is the largest source of carbon pollution, we also set some new standards. We say no later than 2035 should every new car sold in America be a net zero vehicle, and 2040 for heavy duty trucks. And this fits right into Congressman Levin's leadership here. He's pushed us, and he has probably the premier piece of legislation for helping us achieve those net zero electric vehicles. That means an enormous amount of jobs when you think of not just the charging infrastructure that we'll have to build all across America, but winning the competitive race with China and Europeans and others on building those cars. We've got to change over all of the supply chains and empower the American workers to be successful here and build those vehicles. Then when it comes to buildings across the country are about 40% of all of our energy usage. And we say, no, we can do a lot better. By 2030, we propose that all new residential and commercial buildings be net zero buildings. We have the materials to do this. And I know California is grappling with some of this right now, but we can do this, and it'll be another source of thousands and thousands of jobs. And we want to encourage and empower local communities and states to update their building codes so that they're focusing on putting money back into the pocket of consumers, conserving energy, and helping them withstand the impacts of climate. A couple of other things you should know about this report. It's built upon a foundation of environmental justice and fair labor standards, because we realize here in America, in this reckoning, when it comes to racial justice, we've got to repair the mistakes of the past. And we've got to focus on the communities that time and time again are the places where we cite the dirty plants, where most of the pollution builds up, where they have heat islands. So every recommendation we make centers on environmental justice to ensure that if the EPA grant or the EPA permit takes into account the cumulative impacts of pollution over time. We also say, and this is no surprise in the middle of this horrendous COVID-19 pandemic, we've got to improve our public health infrastructure in America. These things go hand in hand. The supply chains, just as testing materials have been in short supply because of a lack of leadership from the White House and the executive branch, we think that pulling together to solve the climate crisis, we can also improve the public health, but that means strengthening our hospitals, strengthening our supply chains, making sure the communities of color and low-income communities, EJ communities, have the tools they need to lift up the folks who live there. So those are a few of the high points of the report. I can't wait to hear what you all have to say. Please check it out if you haven't already, and help us spread the word and build the coalitions we're going to need to take these recommendations and enact them into law. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so grateful to you for making some time, and just for all of your leadership, and really thankful also to the committee staff and to my staff from our office as well. I know a number are on the Zoom here, and I just want to thank each of them for all their hard work. Jonathan, our legislative director, for just doing a great job. We now have 4 of my favorite people, starting with Evan Marks. Evan is one of the neatest people I know. We started a Constituent of the Month program when I became a congressman, and Evan was the first, I think he was the first to win, but just doing so much cool stuff around sustainability. He has the Ecology Center. Of course, he's the founder and executive director of that, and that's in San Juan Capistrano. And it is, for those, including our local guests who have not seen the Ecology Center, gotten to experience it, you've got to take a couple hours one of these days and go check it out. Just the value of local resilient agriculture right in the middle of a fairly densely populated suburban area, the city of San Juan Capistrano in Orange County. And it really is just an amazing place that Evan has created. And so maybe you could spend a few minutes talking about it, Evan, and let us know how we can and when we can come and visit you.
Yeah, thanks, Congressman. Congresswoman Castor, thank you guys for your hard work and dedication to what our commitment is on this planet, which is leaving it better than we came. Like you, Congressman, I have young children as well, and everything I do is towards their health and those in our neighborhood. I'm fortunate to be in stewardship of really the last, believe it or not, the last organic farm in a county of Orange, which is 3.5 million people. And I want to, so we got to throw that statistic out. And it's a 140-year-old farm, but really the last in a generation. And so our mission is to create the model and live it every day, such that this is not the last, but the first in a new generation of farms and farmers. And so just a few high-level points here, and then really just want to validate the hard work you guys have put into this report and talk about some of the points. One thing that's worth reminding is that agriculture, in my opinion, well, always has, and in my opinion, always should be the center of culture. Without culture, we don't really have a reference point for moving forward. And so we're grappling with, do we even care about the future? These are all pretty obsolete ideas if you have culture. And food is what brings us together, and it not only breaks bread with our families, but it breaks bread with those around us. And it's a very universal idea. And so I want to just remind us that we should never let go of that within us, which is that food is culture. And so when we celebrate with our families, hopefully tonight, or our distant relatives at some time down the road, we remember that we all come from various places that are all beautiful. And food is usually that common ground that brings us together. Over the last 5 months now with COVID, we've seen, at least where I'm sitting, is that food is really the reference point for not just culture, but it's really about resiliency and community. We've seen across the headlines of the news, we've seen it in our food system as it's been breaking down. And where you see that, and you see this in various systems breaking down over the chaos that's coming from this pandemic, and it's coming from our climate degradation, among a myriad other effects here, is that these are systems that were been designed away from nature and away from ecological principles that serve people and the planet. So I would like to advocate for agriculture as the only true model, but really the one that is universal, which is that all systems should find value between the ecology, the economy, and the equity of within their serving. And so what we've seen over the pandemic, where a lot of the large producers bring industrialized food for the largest group of people that have all of these systems in place that are collapsing, is that the food went to rot, and we have people that are going hungry. So small, resilient operations like ours, we're a 28-acre certified organic farm in the middle of a suburban environment, and we and the team here rose to the challenge, and we're feeding thousands of families a week. And our really I'd like to say our market, but really our community relationship has expanded exponentially in these last 5 months, which we are so honored and grateful to be in service. And really that is the mission of our organization, is to remind us that no, this isn't the last one, this is the first, because seeing these thousands of people catalyze at our front door looking for healthy, nutritious food for their family, both those in need, food insecure families, as well as those who have the capacity to pay for it, they've been coming by the thousands. And there was a period of time there, Congressman, I don't know if you ever saw the photos, it almost felt like Coachella. There was like hundreds of cars lined up, and it's been a good evolution for the local food movement, which is that there are local farmers. While with restaurants closed and for a period of time with farmers markets closed, an organization like ours, which has direct relationship to their community, both through our farm stand, which is a very sophisticated and viable business, but also through our farm share, which is our CSA or our harvest box. I've seen many other farms been able to really serve the community, and hopefully this is an impetus for more of that. So I really, transitioning into the plan here and some of the recommendations which I'd like to advocate for is that agriculture is the conduit for relationship to our environment. It always has been, it always will be. We've been in service of our environment for many thousands and thousands of years as a resource through agriculture. It is now, and also with that context of thousands of years of working in harmony with nature to provide food for our communities, there was a very recent evolution, and this is where all of the climate has fallen apart, is our relationship to the world at large. All of our resources became about extraction, manipulation, and control. And so just like fossil fuels taken out of whack, it's sort of like our food production systems have been over-industrialized, and we've now been taking advantage of the planet that is in an unsustainable pathway. So I'd like to advocate for and follow your recommendations that agriculture and the living body of soil that is what we're in stewardship of as farmers is the carbon sequestration mechanism at scale. And so if we can invest in these resources, which is by and large, these are new ideas, old ideas brought new again. And that's the good news of all things, is that we're not in invention and innovation is less important as adaptation. And so humans and ecology have been working in concert for countless generations, and so let's bring that back to the forefront. So adopting soil and health stewardship practices back into our everyday agriculture, and that's going to take time, but it's also really about how do we scale the family farmer. I'm looking at some of the statistics, and I'm a first-generation farmer, so I'm really just an advocate for those that have been doing this much longer than I am. But I believe that the strong part of our economy is actually having the most amount of family farmers, not the least amount. And with the average age of our farmer now up to the high 50s, 57 and a half years, we've got another issue on our hands, which is that there's agriculture and the stewardship of our natural resources are going out of style. And so how do we transition that? With that said, right now farming, because of industrialization, we're at about 1.3% of the workforce as farmers. I'd like to move that needle. If I'm one of the only farmers in Orange County, I farm with a group of 20 on this 28-acre property. How do we make that thousands, right? We all eat. There is empty land. We actually are fortunate enough to grow food in partnership with the three major entities that have access to a lot of land, especially in a high real estate environment like this: the cities, school districts, and developers, and they all are eager to feed their communities. And so We've put on as an education center, been mentoring the next generation, and really in our shared interest to mentor and mentor future farmers. And so it's really establishing the next generation of a pilot program so that agriculture is happening for the future, and that we're in the balance of living on this planet in a beautiful way for our future generations. So I thank you guys for the opportunity to share today, and look forward to seeing these ideas move forward into the future.
Thank you so much, Evan. Now, my real question is, did the olive tree that I planted, did it make it? Because I planted it before the pandemic. I have no idea what happened there, but hopefully somebody got some olives out of that.
Well, we'll wait for the olives for another year or two, but yeah, we're keeping a good eye on that, along with all the thousands of trees here. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for all your great work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce Vista City Council member Corinna Contreras, and she is just an amazing leader in our community, really fighting for everyone in Vista. And today she's going to be discussing environmental justice. As Chair Castor said, the Select Committee report weaves environmental justice principles into all of its sections. I think without environmental justice, we will fall well short of our goals. So Corinna, I'm very grateful you're here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Representative Levin. I mean, as I've said before, it's such a contrast. I've lived in Vista my entire life. I just cannot believe that we finally have representation that goes to bat for our community, especially here in Vista. So for those who aren't familiar with our little city of Vista, that's about 18 square miles. We're a little bit further inland, not too far from the beach, about 7-8 miles. But in California, a lot of you probably know, the further inland you go, it gets a little bit more conservative. So for me, it's really important that my representative works in a bipartisan fashion, because that's what I have to do. I'm actually a political minority on my council. I'm the only Democrat. And so it makes it difficult for me sometimes to have these types of conversations. So what I need to do is be able to build coalitions. And when we're talking about environmental justice, that is the best point to start common ground discussions. And I'll tell you why. Because, for example, in Vista, when you drive through it, one thing that you'll notice real quick is there is no equity in our tree canopy. Okay, this is like basic level stuff. I represent District 1, and the district that I represent has a lot of individuals who walk or use their bike either the entire trip or to get to public transit. And the reason that I always use tree canopy as a way to start a conversation with the residents of Vista to get to the point of talking about environmental justice is that it's so easy to see the connection between people that have to walk everywhere they go and there's no shade on their route. And we're talking about a route that is frequented every day by so many people. North Santa Fe. North Santa Fe is a direct, almost flat connection to our transit center and to our downtown, yet the shade is almost non-existent. The benches for people to sit at, just at bus stops, non-existent. Bus shelters, non-existent. Every once in a while, there's a trash can, thank God, but just look at what my constituents have to go on a daily basis. They go to the grocery store, they go take their kids to school, they then go back home, do a bunch of other stuff throughout their day, then they go back and they pick up their kids. And so when we're talking about environmental justice, we're talking about the fact that people that do their daily activities, what is their access to green space? What is their access to quick and functional transportation so that it doesn't take them 2 hours to have a one-way trip to the grocery store, So for me, when I look at my community, and then I look at my climate action plan, and then I look at this committee's report, I'm like, okay, well, thankfully, I have a representative at the federal level that is really being a champion for me here at the local level, where I can't even, my community, they have asked, where is the equity piece in our climate action plan? The entire climate action plan never talks about equity. It does not even mention the word equity. And that has been a #1 ask, along with having a inclusive tree canopy from our residents. And so we need to be able to have people at different levels of government, go to bat for us. I also represent a community where a lot of the individuals are residents and don't have the ability to participate in the vote. So for me, environmental justice means that we take into consideration and we look at individuals in our community, regardless of citizenship status, and we look at also, where do they work? A lot of the individuals that live here in District 1, they work in the service sector. They work in agriculture. Vista is surrounded on the north part, northeast a little bit more, by some prime agricultural land. How do we preserve that? Because when it comes to preserving agricultural land, as Evan Marks said, which I'm going to say this, I was fangirling a little bit. I am a huge, I mean, it's just incredible. I love your Instagram for the Ecology Center. I'm always looking at it. And, how do we multiply that? Because we know that agriculture should provide good jobs. It should not be exploitative work. My constituents should not be exploited when they go to work. They should not be exposed to harmful chemicals. So what is it that our federal government can do to help the local municipal government, the county government, to start implementing more carbon farming, more regenerative agriculture practices, because we know that the chemicals that are used, they're killing things for a reason, and we shouldn't be happy to use these chemicals on our food, plain and simple. So that means that we need to have a more localized food system where we do have more people part of that equation growing. It means that in local government, we need to look at overlays. And so the report, it's incredible what you all did, because you're looking at it at such a comprehensive, intersectional way. And that's exactly what we need to do at this moment if we're going to meet the challenge of today and the challenge of the future, which is going to be exponentially harder. The last thing that I want to say is when it comes to resilience, that's resilience, and equity is the cornerstone of this report on our climate crisis and how do we move forward. Resilience also means that we need to be building a workforce for the future now. Here in Vista, our median age is about 33. We have a really young population. My district, it's very, very young. And so what I see when I look around my community, unfortunately, is a lot of disconnected youth. People are not born, a lot of my constituents are not born with networks where they have any idea what a green job is. No idea. They're not even thinking about that. And so, it's so important when I look at this report and I see how it's a roadmap to how we can invest in our disconnected and communities of concern, including our tribal governments, right? And looking at these connections of workforce development and allowing and giving the tools to our youth to create these future selves, and so that they're invested now for a better planet in the future, and they know that they're going to be able to receive some benefits from being part of the solution. So I'm so thankful to be a part of this call today, and just ecstatic that I have a representative that really fights for Vista and doesn't just want to bring little fights here and there. I mean, you stay out of all the political BS, and you just get things done. And that's what we need. And we're so excited. And I can't wait till we're able to really tie all these pieces of the climate crisis and the solutions and the opportunities that come from this crisis together, because it's going to make such a stronger fabric for our society, so that we can all live in a more equitable and inclusive type of community. So thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We're honored to have you and grateful for all of your leadership, and look forward to working together for a long time to come. I also want to give great credit to the city of Oceanside, and Russ has been doing a spectacular job really helping to develop their climate action plan. They are a leader in so many different ways, and I'm grateful that Russ is here to speak more, because I think a lot of what we talk about in the Select Committee report is directly reflected in what cities like Oceanside are already doing. But I'd love for you to share more about some of the innovation there and the leadership and the success that you've had in the city of Oceanside.
Congressman Levin, Congressman Castor, thank you so much, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really honored to be invited to speak with you this afternoon about climate action at the local level. I work in advanced planning for the city of Oceanside, where I'm currently managing comprehensive updates of the city's general plan and local coastal program. Climate mitigation and adaptation are key components of both of these projects. The first phase of our general plan update, which was adopted in May of last year, included the city's first climate action plan. The second phase of the update, which is currently underway, will establish a policy framework for smart growth, for alternative transportation, resource conservation, and other climate related efforts. And per state law, the safety element of the general plan will be updated to address climate adaptation, which is an essential consideration for a city with a coastline, with 3 coastal watersheds, and with a very large wildland interface. Along with addressing coastal access issues, which is really the focus of an LCP, or local coastal program, that document will include policies that encourage renewable energy, energy efficiency, water conservation, alternative transportation, and preservation of sensitive habitat within the city's coastal watersheds. The LCP update will also include a coastal hazards adaptation plan, which outlines the city's comprehensive strategy for protecting and enhancing the resilience of our vulnerable coastal assets, both public and private. So, Congress members, your invitation is very timely, as we've just adopted several ordinances that implement key GHG emissions reduction measures and activate what we're calling our CAP consistency checklist, which is an option available to the development community to streamline the environmental review process for projects that are subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. These ordinances establish zoning standards for renewable energy facilities, electric vehicle parking and charging facilities, urban forestry, and what we call transportation demand management, or TDM. And I'd be happy to share details of these ordinances if you're interested. To achieve consistency with our goals as promulgated in our climate action plan, and at the same time address those inevitable concerns that the local businesses and the development community typically have, we've worked hard to ensure that these new zoning standards are, one, accessible and unambiguous. The development community tells us again and again, what we need is certainty. We're not so much concerned about how rigorous your standards are. We just need you to tell us up front what those standards are. And so we've really tried to create transparency with these requirements. We want requirements that are physically and logistically and financially feasible to achieve, and that go beyond that and provide a positive return on investment for developers and for businesses. We want outcome-based standards. In other words, those that aren't overly prescriptive or rigid in terms of how compliance is achieved, that provide options for how compliance is achieved, and that in so doing really allow for innovation. And then finally, we want standards that are supportive of an efficient project review process that encourages housing and job growth in those parts of the city that are best able to accommodate it. It's very gratifying to be able to report progress on climate action in Oceanside. We still have a lot of work to do, particularly in the areas of land use, mobility, environmental justice, and in the consumer choices of our residents, our workforce, and our visitors. So we're working to promote more efficient land use. We are working to provide more viable transportation options and really foster a local culture of sustainability and shared responsibility for emissions reduction. So federal guidance and support, I believe, can aid these local efforts immensely. Federal funding and promulgating of climate science to help our local communities really understand the urgency of climate change. Federal policies and guidelines that don't preempt local action, but rather give local officials like myself effectively more political cover to ask more of our constituents, and practices that render federal government operations more sustainable, which provides a very positive example to state, regional, and local governments to do the same. So I think about civil rights, I think about consumer and worker protections, air and water quality, habitat and open space preservation, and the ways in which the federal government has led in these areas, set the example, created expectations, and really helped to change the national culture in positive ways. And I think there's a positive trickle-down effect from that. And I see this climate action plan, congressional climate action plan, as really a great step toward providing federal direction to local communities like ours and assisting local officials, as I said earlier, really in cultivating a culture of collective investment in and stewardship of local resources. So that's on the mitigation front. I don't have a lot of time to talk about climate adaptation, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to note the enormous elephant, or maybe in this context, the enormous elephant seal that is present in every room in which we gather to discuss sea level rise and coastal adaptation in Oceanside. And that elephant seal is the Camp Pendleton Boat Basin, which for nearly 80 years has impeded the natural flow of sand from the Santa Margarita River and other coastal watersheds within what's called the Oceanside Littoral Cell. So we very much welcome the support of Congress in helping to bring the Army Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies to the table to discuss full mitigation of really the massive impacts that the boat basin continues to have on our down coast communities and beaches, particularly Oceanside, as we're nearest that facility. We can entertain a very wide, and we are entertaining a very wide range of adaptation strategies to preserve our coastline and protect our coastal assets. And I would welcome the chance to talk about those things. But until we know if or how the boat basin impacts will be mitigated, it's very difficult for us to know what the intermediate and long-term strategies for preserving our beaches and our coastal assets really ought to be. So again, I thank you so much, Congressman Levin. I really appreciate the extent to which you have been diligent in pursuing a solution to the beach erosion problem that essentially plagues all of the coastal areas in House District 49. So thank you so much for that, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Russ, and we'll keep advocating for the special shoreline study for Oceanside and the entire suite of Army Corps projects that we continue to undertake in our district. For Chair Castor's probably no surprise at all to you, Kathy, but our entire district needs assistance with regard to protecting our bluffs. Really, most of Southern California does. We've got one of the busiest rail corridors in the United States between Los Angeles and San Diego, and some of it needs immediate assistance. So we got about $11 million for a piece of that in Del Mar. that is at the highest risk. But we really are going to have to rethink rail transit in terms of the proximity to the ocean. The estimates from our Regional Association of Governments, it's going to cost billions of dollars over many years to really get it under control. But I think we can, and then of course throughout the district we've got certain pockets that really do need assistance, like Oceanside, Solana Beach, Encinitas. So it's a magnificent place to live, but we have the very real threat of sea level rise that we have to deal with, and of coastal erosion. With that, I have the great honor of having saved, I think, the best for last, right, Jason? I would say. I mean, I've known Jason for over a decade. We started our work in this industry, in this sector, when we were slightly younger. But somehow I look older and Jason looks the same. I don't think that's fair, personally. But I've known Jason now for over a decade. Phenomenal work at Clean Tech San Diego, one of the great leading regional incubators with really a national and international presence in a lot of what they do, because a lot of what our economy needs in San Diego in terms of the international collaboration. So phenomenal job. Jason, take it away.
Congressman, thank you so much. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that you have a Scripps Institution of Oceanography reusable bag there behind you.
Yeah.
When we talk about climate change and climate science, I mean, we are fortunate here in San Diego to house some of the world's leading climate scientists. So, Chair Castor, welcome back to San Diego, albeit virtually. Did appreciate the time you spent when we got together, I guess about a year plus ago, Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and really thank you for all that you've done on this subcommittee. I will say 547 pages in. Just impressive work from you and your colleagues. And on a personal note, I want to thank you again for the work you've done on behalf of the LGBTQ community, both when you were county commissioner in Florida and during your time in Congress. So thank you for that as well. A little bit of background, Clean Tech San Diego is a business association. We were founded almost 14 years ago now to really position the greater San Diego region as a global leader in the clean tech economy. And since that time, we've seen here in California and in the San Diego region, we've proved time and time again that investments in the clean tech sector and the establishment of aggressive environmental goals benefit both our economy and our environment. Today in our region, we receive upwards of 50% of our energy comes from renewable energy sources. In many local jurisdictions, thanks to the leadership of the council member and Russ, are passing climate action plans to increase that target to 100% renewable energy. We are home to the world's largest battery storage project. There's significant battery storage projects in Vista. We have about 40,000 electric vehicles on the ground here, and we are home to the second most solar rooftop installations in the country. In the San Diego region, this industry, pre-COVID, employs about 40,000 people and has about a $7 billion impact on our regional economy. That is not insignificant. And I actually expect, kind of leading COVID, when we get to that point, I hope those numbers will increase. And many of the accomplishments that we're seeing in our region are due to the fact that state and local jurisdictions are setting forth clear goals to mitigate our impact on the environment. And the industry that I represent is able to respond with technology, innovation, and deployment. In fact, in our industry, in the clean energy business, we don't really see regulations as the enemy of economic growth. On the contrary, we believe that when governing bodies set forth clear and aggressive goals for greenhouse gas reductions, they set a goal that will be met with innovation and will result in progress and economic growth. And I believe the Climate Crisis Action Plan does just that. Each pillar that you've identified, I think all 12 of them in the report are critical. And I don't think one is more important than the other. They're going to have tremendous impacts on our local and national economy. And again, while it's difficult to prioritize them, I would like to highlight that pillar 2, investing in technology development, is something great importance to San Diego, to Clean Tech San Diego, and I think to the state of California and beyond. In fact, in 2016, Clean Tech San Diego launched the Southern California Energy Innovation Network. It's a California Energy Commission funded program to support startups with electric energy focused technologies. The program provides free resources through a consortium of regional partners and businesses to really help energy entrepreneurs successfully bring their innovations to market. And as of just last month, we've worked with over 50 companies. They are employing close to 300 people. They've raised $5 million in private capital. They've raised almost $24 million in public funding. And so supporting the next wave of clean tech entrepreneurs and the next wave of clean tech innovation is critical to the future of our environment and our economy. And I applaud the fact that the report touches on this. It's a proven fact here in San Diego and California and beyond that we no longer live in a time when economic growth has to come at the expense of the environment. And the Climate Action Plan, the Climate Crisis Action Plan, with your specific policy recommendations, recognizes this fact. And I think will put this country exactly where it needs to be and should be, with the climate front and center as we embark on economic recovery. So, Congressman and Congresswoman, on behalf of Clean Tech San Diego and the organizations that we work with and the businesses that we represent, we truly believe that the Climate Crisis Action Plan that you've adopted or that you put forth provides a roadmap for Congress to build a clean energy economy that values workers, advances environmental justice, and meet the challenges of the climate crisis. So thank you for your dedication to these efforts. We believe that our environment and our economy depend exactly on the work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for your continued leadership and all the great work being done by Clean Tech San Diego, both the organization itself and all the members. Really, really remarkable work being done. With that, if we have, let's see, Jonathan or Kyle, do we have any members of the press that are interested in asking any questions of the chair or anybody on the panel?
We've got Colin here from the Castor Dispatch, I believe.
Hi, Colin.
Hey, how are you? Hey, I'm good actually. I really honestly don't have any questions. I think this talk covered a relevant topic, and the report's pretty in depth. So I don't really have anything for now. I do want to say I actually moved over here from Florida, so I'm kind of familiar with the humidity over there and the effects of climate change over there as well. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, Jason.
Just a kind of process question, kind of what's next? I know the plan has been put out there. How do we move this forward? How do we support you moving it forward? So maybe what the next steps are, and then how can organizations and communities like we represent support the work you're doing and help move this forward?
Chair Castor, you want to, I think we're going to have an election coming up in, this is not a political event, but I do think that's kind of an important thing for the future of this plan.
Yeah, but what was heartening is right after the rollout of our Climate Crisis Action Plan, a day or two later, the House of Representatives passed its 5-year transportation and infrastructure reauthorization. This year it was called the Moving Forward Act, and it contained a lot of our recommendations to hammer out into law. And then a week or two later, when we passed the National Defense Authorization Bill, again, it contained a lot of our recommendations to help make military bases more resilient and to ensure that the Department of Defense continues on with their planning for escalating risks across the globe due to climate change. So right here and now, we can move a lot of these policies forward. Some of the larger bites of the apple that we're going to need will have to come with a better U.S. Senate and a different person in the White House. But I think we may be on the cusp of that. And if the COVID pandemic hasn't demonstrated anything, we've got to listen to scientists. We've got to listen to public health experts. We've got to understand that there is great inequity across the country that's built up over time. We're going to need to enact a clean and green stimulus, something like the Recovery Act of over 10 years ago, where I'm sure Jason can tell you, we invested a lot there in clean energy technologies that has paid dividends for businesses and communities, for America's innovative lead in the world on many. We have to do this again. So those are a few things I'd highlight to come.
The only other thing I would add, Jason, is that it was a really important foundational piece to pull together everything happening in the Congress and getting all those best ideas in one place. And it really did impact the Biden climate report as well. There's a huge amount of overlap between what we have in this plan and what Biden is proposing. The other thing I'll mention is that the number of bipartisan measures in this plan, I think, might surprise a lot of people. You know, I think we already got the Great American Outdoors Act, which I think was in the Climate Crisis Action Plan, into law. And that's sort of an example where you had about half of the Republican senators and all of the Democratic senators, and rough equivalent in the House. I think it passed like 310 to 107, something like that, with virtually all the Democrats and about half the Republicans that got behind the permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and then to fill the backlog for the national parks. So that's an example. I mean, I think if, particularly if we have a friendly majority leader in the Senate who will work with us in partnership to get a lot of these ideas across the finish line, I think there is a ton in this report that we can achieve within the next couple of years. And if we have a different administration, then you know, I really think we're off and running in January, really with a renewed sense of optimism about being able to deal with the challenge. And all credit to Chair Castor and their great staff for putting all this together in a you know, very straightforward, science-based way. Any other thoughts or questions before we break? All right, hearing none, I want to thank our chair again for taking some time out of her day. I will see you on Saturday, Kathy, to deal with the Postal Service. And I want to thank Jason and Evan and Russ and Corinna for joining us this afternoon, for your continued good work in our community. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you all very soon.
Thanks,
Take care,
everybody.
everybody. Thank you all.